What a great kick.
Robin Chad Townsend plays on. Plays to the whistle. Kicks away for Valentine Holmes. Cronulla's in again.
Wow.
Chad Townsend, brilliant.
Hello, welcome back to the Talk of the Town podcast. My name is Chad Townsend and this is episode 3 for 2020. And today is a little bit different to what we've spoken about the first 2 episodes where I've had a few of my Sharks teammates on. But today I've got my financial planner, Ryan Porter. Welcome, mate. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Chad. Thanks for having me.
Before we do get into it, I quickly just want to say, and I want to put this out there, that just a little disclaimer for today's podcast that what we talk about is general advice. It's more about us having a discussion, and if you feel like you need to see someone for your financial situation, then please make sure you go and see a trusted professional, because today we're just 2 blokes having a chat, but we're talking about money, and hopefully, you know, you guys could maybe take a few tips that could hopefully help you with your own personal situation. But yeah, that's just a little disclaimer for today's podcast. So, mate, as I said, thanks for coming on. For those people out there, tell us a bit about yourself.
No dramas. So like you said, I'm a financial advisor, which I tell people is basically like a personal trainer. But money is sort of the space where I operate. My job is basically helping people take control of their finances and putting in place plans to help them achieve their goals.
Yep.
Been in the game about 10 years. Came in around the GFC, which was sort of an interesting time to get into finance. Tough to get a job as well.
Yep.
So yeah, I've sort of been on a bit of a journey over that time, and yeah, now about 4 years ago, set up my own business based in the Shire, working with sort of local people, living close to home, and yeah, loving life at the moment.
So what does a financial planner do, like day to day?
Yep. Okay, good question. Normally I tell my mates I'm a financial planner and they switch off. So, that personal trainer example is one that people can sort of get their head around a bit more.
Yep.
Where, yeah, clients will come in for a meeting, we sit down, do a bit of an assessment of where they're at the moment. All the numbers sort of get put on the table, income, expenses, assets, debts. And then really we start talking about the important stuff, which is where they want to go. So from a goal point of view, next sort of 1, 3, 10 years, where would they like to be financially and what are the things they want to achieve? And then, yeah, my job, I guess a bit like the personal trainer then, is to come up with the strategy or the plan to make sure that those goals can sort of happen and they got the right strategies in place with their money.
Beautiful. That was like, I guess, kind of my next question was, how does, you know, I feel like financial success is such a huge umbrella, like there's so much that sort of comes into it, but how does someone out there who might be listening today, like how do they achieve financial success?
Good question. A loaded question. Yeah, so I've got like a couple of steps that I would normally try to take clients through when we're going through that sort of initial meeting, and I guess the journey that comes off the back of starting a relationship. And my pitch to them, I guess, linking in with that personal trainer example, is it's not too dissimilar to achieve success with money as it is in the other areas of their life. The sort of the steps are the same. You know, the vehicle of money and I guess the strategies that come with that is a little bit different. But from a starting point, it's really about goals.
Yep.
And trying to work out what are the targets that they want to start working towards and aiming for. Mm-hmm. And you'd be surprised, I guess, how many people are out there sort of doing their best, and be it single or a couple, don't really have, I guess, that clear list of targets that they're working towards.
So that's like short, medium, long term.
Yeah.
Like longer long term, like retirement as well?
Well, it depends. Older clients, you know, when retirement's a bit nearer, mm-hmm. it's a bit easier to focus on. But younger clients, which is sort of probably more where I operate and specialise,
yep.
a couple of years is a long time because, you know, there's a lot going on, careers, families, just sort of general living, travel, all that sort of stuff. So
yep.
sitting down with a 30 or 40-year-old and talking about where they'll be at 67 can be a bit tricky. So normally from a planning point of view, if they've got the right structure and habits in place in the short term, that will help them achieve those sort of longer term goals later on.
Yep.
That makes sense. So step one, sort of that goal setting piece, and that's exactly the same as a personal trainer. You know, they'd want to know exactly, you know, putting on weight, are you losing weight, because that will determine what we need to do from a strategy point of view.
Beautiful.
Next step then, number two is sort of knowing their numbers, and you know, finance, it can be a bit of a complex area, and from a starting point of view, really need to know, I guess, income, what comes in, what goes out, what's left over.
Yep.
And then, from an asset point of view, you know, do they have savings? Do they have a property? Do they have credit card debt? What are we sort of playing with to start with? Because until that's clear, it's really hard to work out where we can go.
Yep.
Sometimes it's a tough process because what comes back at you isn't great.
Yep.
And maybe that can lead to people sort of avoiding it. But that's really the starting point, to work out where you are starting from, so that we can sort of work out where we need to go moving forward.
And I guess once you sort of sit down, you know, you go through goals, go through you know, expenses, what comes in, outgoings, bills, rent, mortgage, then it would be time to implement the plan based on the scenario, right?
Yeah, correct. And you know, one of the things, just back to that knowing your numbers, is sometimes it's not great, but that's good because you know.
Yep.
And then you can start making some changes where put your head in the sand. You know, it can be a number of years before people sort of get to the point where it's so painful that they start doing something. And with money, it's always the way that every client you sort of sit in front of, or I sit in front of, wishes they'd sort of done something a bit sooner.
Yep.
So
how for I guess for a lot of the listeners out there, like for anyone who's listening, so how often do you think, you know, the average person should be reviewing their financial situation?
Good question. Well, like budgeting usually is sort of the big one.
Yep.
So what heaps of people hate budgets, and you know, think of spreadsheets and you know, number nerds with calculators and stuff like that, which I am sort of, but that's my job.
I am too a little bit.
Yeah, that's true. But you know, it's really important to have an understanding of that monthly position, and even if you're not looking at every month, to make changes, tick off goals, you've really got to be progressing each month.
Yep.
And so if you don't know what's happening in the short term with that sort of expense income sort of situation, it's really hard to make changes. From a review point of view, it probably depends on the person, because people that aren't that interested in finance and money, they're probably not going to look to review this sort of stuff each month or as often as someone like yourself, or you know, obviously me with work would do. But you know, 6 months is probably a reasonable time frame to just sort of do a bit of a stock take on where they're at and how the year's progressing.
Yep.
I guess a lot of people treat New Year's as that one point in the year when it's like, okay, it's the start of a new year, maybe I'll have a think about this stuff now. But a lot of the stats say that by February, people sort of,
drop off.
they've fallen off, or they've forgotten about it, or they're not worried about it anymore. But
I think, you know, one thing I quite often, I've talked about this, a number of the boys at training, you know, when we go out for coffee and things like that, and we quite often talk about, you know, looking after yourself and making sure you put yourself in a good situation. But you know, this stuff, or this, you know, the strategies about looking after yourself for everybody in terms of, you know, saving money and investing money, like you don't get taught that at school, and you basically leave it up to your parents to, you know, teach you these things. But then I guess the times have changed where our parents probably didn't get taught the things that now we're getting taught, you know, with our money and in investing and things like that. So, you know, one day, like, I would love to see it be taught to my kids in school. Like, I'm going to be tough on my kids about saving money when they get older and pocket money and things like that. But I'd love to see it. I'd love to see it get taught in school. Yeah, you're 100% right. That's what I see heaps. Where, like you said, it's not really a topic, money, that gets talked about often. Most people sort of grow up, and their view around money have been built by how their parents have acted with money. Yep. And oftentimes, if your parents weren't great with money, then people sort of get out into the world, and their habits or their behaviours or what they've seen over time isn't great. And oftentimes, everyone will get a job, get their income, and sort of just jump out and sort of do their best. But because, it wasn't taught in school, maybe their parents didn't talk about it, oftentimes with mates and stuff like that, you might not share everything, you know, like what are you earning, what do you got saved, and that sort of stuff. So it's not a topic that gets talked about a lot. Yep.
And then then it gets a bit blurry, sort of like you said, jumping out into the world of media where it's pretty complex. There's heaps of jargon.
Yeah.
A bit like health, everyone's got their own take on
Yep.
what works
on
and
the
what
news
doesn't.
and things like that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's jump into, I guess, some of, I guess, the strategies that you might recommend to some of your clients or some of the listeners today who think, some things that they might be able to do to help them get into a better financial situation.
Okay. So there's probably a few key strategies, I guess, that pop up a lot in conversations with clients.
Yep.
Being in Australia, property is sort of everyone's favourite.
Massive one.
Yeah, financial topic.
Yep.
And usually the first place most people want to put their money.
Yep.
And that's because we've all sort of generally grown up seeing, grandparents or parents or family members making good money from owning property.
Yep.
And there's a huge, I guess, emotional element to sort of property ownership in Australia.
Yeah, I guess it's like a notch on the belt.
Yeah.
Owning a property.
Yeah.
And I guess it can be good and bad. Like I feel like, it's such, like I said, it's a notch on the belt if you buy a property, but you could buy the property for way over what it's worth, in an area which could be on the decline. So it's so important that you get that decision right, isn't it?
Yeah, you're 100% right. It's often seen as a mark of success if someone says they own a property.
Yep.
And all the numbers behind it sometimes doesn't matter to everyone else.
Yep.
But for someone like me, it's sort of it's the most important thing because that transaction, that decision is usually the biggest one anyone's ever going to make.
Yep.
And so making sure that if you go down that path, you do it in the right way. You've got a good deposit.
Yep.
Got savings sort of left over after the purchase to give you a bit of a safety net.
Buffer, yep.
Yeah, a bit of a buffer in case rates go up or something happens with work. So there's definitely some things that people sort of need to think about with property. It's not just sort of the purchase.
I think on the deposit, you just touched on the deposit, like for someone out there who might be looking at a property worth around $1 million, like obviously, you've got to you've got to have a deposit. You've got to have potentially money for mortgage insurance. If you don't have the correct amount of deposit, then it's stamp duty, all other fees. What would someone be looking at in terms of layout if they were to buy a property worth around $1 million?
Yeah, great. So like you said, so the first thing, banks will have different policies around how much they're willing to lend for a purchase.
Yep.
But I would say most of the purchases that I see with clients is probably where they'll put in either sort of a 10 to 20% deposit of the value of the property. Yep. So buying out $1 million, they're usually looking at 100 to sort of 200,000 as that sort of initial deposit.
Yep.
But things that you need to consider on top of that, like you touched on, sort of like stamp duty,
Yep.
And all the legal fees and the other costs that are associated with the purchase.
And sorry to jump in, but stamp duty on $1 million property is around 50,000.
Yeah,
Am I right?
it's probably pretty close to the mark where, those extra costs,
Yep.
when you're looking to buy, you've probably got to factor in about 5% of what you're buying. So, if you're buying out $1 million, you might need 100 to 200 sort of deposit.
Yep.
And then you probably got to factor in another 50,000 for stamp duty, legal fees, bank fees, and the rest. So, one, that's a sizable amount of money for anyone.
Yep.
And then two, obviously, to go down that path, you're borrowing anywhere from 800 to 900,000 in that scenario. Mm-hmm. So, one of the expenses there that you touched on is mortgage insurance. So, if someone buys a property and they have less than a 20% deposit, the bank will charge them an insurance policy fee.
Yeah. Which will just go on top of their loan.
Yeah, generally, which just sort of just gets put on top of their loan. The issue with the mortgage insurance piece is you pay the premium for the policy, but it protects the bank.
Yep.
So it's a good situation for them.
They're rolling in it, aren't they?
Yeah, they do all right. But that's sort of, just another expense that sort of needs to be factored in and someone maybe looking at buying the first time or the second time might not be aware of, but it can be pretty substantial. Like on that, in this scenario we're talking about now, I sort of had a look before today, and if you were to put in the 10% deposit to buy the $1 million property,
yep,
the mortgage insurance is about $22,000.
So there you go. So if you're buying $1 million property and you've got $100,000 saved, so 10%, Then you've got the mortgage insurance, which was what you just say, 22.
22.
Plus, say the the stamp duty, which is around just at 50.
Yep.
So there's $172,000 outlay to buy the $1 million property, and you've paid off $100,000 because that's your deposit. So you've got a loan of $922,000.
Yep. Yeah, if the mortgage insurance is sort of linked on there, then that's your loan. And so they're big numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Scary numbers for a lot of people.
Yeah. And that's one of the things like we were sort of talking about before today, just as sort of a challenge for younger Australians and I guess prospective home buyers or those sort of wanting to enter the market is the entry point's so high.
Yep.
We live in a great country, but have sort of some of the highest property prices in the world.
And especially in Sydney, like the prices in Sydney have been phenomenal, gone skyrocketed over the last few. It's like I know they eased back a bit last year, but now, from maybe 2012 to 2017. Yeah,
there was a
massive
spike.
spike.
It might have been like a 50 to 70% sort of
just phenomenal
price per room. So fantastic for all those people that were in the market
got
and got to experience it.
Yeah.
But for those sort of now, sort of looking to get in the market, it makes it harder because the starting point's so high.
Yeah.
And that then just sort of leads into, just from a property point of view, those looking at buying their first or sometimes even their second property, see it a lot with clients where, there's not many people that I would say walk in the door with that amount of cash just sort of sitting in their bank account.
Yep.
So some clients might be buying property off the back of owning an apartment or a townhouse as sort of the first purchase, and they've been able to use that as a stepping stone to get into the next purchase.
Yep.
Other clients who might be looking at their first purchase, often I've seen it a bit with younger clients, are sort of then lean on their parents to help them get into the market.
Yep.
And sort of help with those sort of deposits.
This is something that's probably become more frequent over maybe the last few years. Am I right?
Yeah. Yeah,
where,
definitely.
It's got an official name, doesn't it?
Yeah, so it's like a family guarantee.
Guarantor, yeah.
Yep,
That's
or a guarantor
guarantee,
loan.
Yep. So how does that work?
So basically what happens is rather than having that full deposit amount that we've spoken about, a client might have some of it, and then their parents who own a property can sort of use the equity that they have available in their place to help their child, son, daughter, family member get into the market. So in the example we spoke about before, where the client might need that sort of 170,000 plus, if they don't have all of that, or even sort of the 20% deposit where it's sort of 200,000, their parents can sort of help them get into that property by using some of the equity in their property rather than the client having all of that just stored in cash.
And then they pay off the loan of their parents. Effectively, they pay back their parents.
Yeah, well, it gets technical, but basically the child will have the full loan, so the parents don't actually have to physically have a loan that they sort of pay back.
Yep.
It's just that the bank will incorporate the parents' property as part of the loan.
Yep.
So yeah, works its way around.
Bank stuff.
Yeah, it's sort of bank stuff to everyone. Yeah. But yeah, basically.
Well, this is definitely becoming more frequent.
Yeah.
I've heard it a few times. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just because like what we spoke about, the prices are so high.
Yep.
It's pretty hard to save that amount, and especially off the back of a moving market in the last couple of years. Even if someone's got a good job and pretty good incomes, it's pretty hard to save as fast as property prices have sort of gone up.
Yep.
So therefore, you can do it yourself through savings. Those that are in the market can benefit and sort of go down the stepping stone path. Or the third option that I see quite a bit is parents sort of helping their kids get into the market. Yeah,
nice. All right. Well, I guess the next strategy would be, investing in shares, like a share portfolio.
Yep.
What type of shares I think, or I guess are becoming the most popular these days, or I guess the most safest for an average person.
Yep. Yeah. Well, with the share part, what I'll say is that usually, and again, this is from my experience with clients and stuff.
Yep.
But,
disclaimer.
Yeah, disclaimer. General disclaimer. Don't sue me. Shares, I've found, because property is sort of like the number one strategy that sort of most clients want to focus on, it sort of usually fits in as number two.
Yep.
Some clients, obviously, it might be number one, but generally speaking, it's evolved with sort of my clients over the last sort of couple of years, where they might have sort of secured their property, or they've got their home, and that's sorted. And the thing about property transactions, just like we spoke about in that last little bit, is it's a lot of money for the one transaction.
Yep.
Where the benefit of shares is it's a lot lower sort of entry point in, you know, money you need to put in initially or ongoing to sort of treat that as an investment vehicle to help you grow your wealth over time or build some funds.
Yep.
So yeah, generally speaking, you can start with as little as sort of, you know, $500 to $1,000 as a starting point, and then from there build that each month with $100 plus, you know, and obviously work your way up. So for a lot of people, it's a lot more economical to look at that as an option.
Yep.
And there's a lot more flexibility, where with property, the banks have their rules and they have their monthly repayment, and, you know, they almost don't care what else is going on. They just sort of need to be paid.
Yep.
Where with the share investing side, it's a bit more flexible in that someone can dial up how much they put in each month, turn it off. If they needed their money back,
They can
sell and back in your account in a couple of days. So it's a lot more flexible.
You can understand, I guess, why people lean towards shares other than property, can you?
Yeah. And I guess my job's usually, I guess, I sit in the middle and just sort of look at, you know, from an investment point of view, what's sort of best and what will help you sort of get those goals.
Yep.
But yeah, because of house prices and how much it costs to sort of get in, it's definitely becoming more and more common with like younger clients.
Yep.
That shares becomes a vehicle that they're happy to look at. Usually it's a bit scary first time around, because a lot of the
you hear about then again, we're back to the very start. Like, you hear about the big crashes on the news and things like that.
Yeah.
You can understand why that might scare off a few people.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know,
but also there's huge benefits, isn't there?
Well, there is. And over like a very long period of time, shares and property have probably performed very similar, like from a total return point of view. But what most people would hear is sort of 9 o'clock news, or you know, Daily Telegraph in the morning, and, you know, fear sort of sells. So usually they're focused on showing how bad things are. Rather than, I guess, what are the benefits from considering strategies like this?
Yeah, beautiful. All right, well, the next one, I guess, and a lot of people, you know, will save for or go on quite frequently, I guess, is holidays.
Yep.
You know, what's the best way for someone out there to save money for a holiday? You know, obviously they've got a lot of other expenses, bills, etc., rent, but also want to save for a holiday. Like, what's the best way to save for a holiday?
Yeah. Another disclaimer, but oftentimes with finance, the answers are pretty simple.
Yep.
But, you know, sometimes people don't like simple. They like something really flashy or some sort of gimmicky, get rich quick sort of option. But I would say, again, just from a client point of view, like 9 out of 10 clients, when they walk in the door for that sort of first meeting, property will be in the top 3.
Yep.
And then normally travel for everyone. Like, we're sort of
probably younger generation.
Younger
definitely.
generation. And especially, I guess, where we live, like, it's sort of it's a real lifestyle based sort of area. And you know, oftentimes people are saying, well, I'm working to go away and experience things, and, you know,
European holiday.
Yeah, European holiday mid-year.
I'm sure you get a lot of that.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, obviously young families, it's about sort of giving their kids opportunities to, you know, see the world and experience things and that sort of stuff. So usually, and again, this is pretty simple, but this is effective. But from a holiday perspective, coming back to the goal piece, it's trying to work out each year how much they want to allocate towards that goal.
Yep.
And I would say average sort of client spend or target each year would probably be like about 5 to 12 grand a year.
Yep.
And so at the start of the year, and this is where a bit of the planning comes in, it's important to make sure that the money that you earn is going towards the things that are important.
Yep.
And often when you don't have a strategy and you're just sort of running the best you can, it's easy for money to sort of disappear without a structure in place.
Yep.
So with the holidays, basically the plan is usually working out first step how much I want to allocate towards it, setting up a specific sort of holiday savings account.
So would you open up an account and name it holiday savings account?
Yeah, definitely.
Specifically?
Yeah. There's a lot of like psychology linked up with money, and you know, motivation comes from sort of knowing what you're saving for and knowing where you're going. So yeah, definitely like set up a savings account specifically for holidays. And ideally, and this is a big one, set that savings account up with a bank that's not where you sort of pay goes into or your everyday banking.
Yep.
Because it can get blurry when you've just sort of got all your money in one account and what's for holidays, what's for rent, what's for spending. So basically, we set up a holiday account, work out how much they need to allocate, set a monthly target, set up an automatic savings sort of plan so that money goes off, builds up into the account.
Yep.
What clients find is people spend what's in their account. So if you leave all of their money in their account, they'll spend all of it.
Yep.
If you reduce that, normally you find a way to sort of live on what's left. And the power with this comes in like 3 months or 6 months time when they've got a decent amount socked away and they go, oh, we can book some flights or let's start talking about the next trip rather than sort of having to find a couple of $1,000 to pay for something or pull a credit card out when it's time that they've had enough of work that they want to go on a holiday.
Yep. Love that. All right, I'll move on. I guess that's the sort of strategies, we've touched on for a lot of, I guess, people wanting to improve their financial situation. But I'll move on to a few questions now. And I guess the first one off the top of my head was, what are the hot topics for 2020 with with the finance industry? I presume that the industry is ever changing year to year, new products, etc. Compliance with the banking, Royal Commission not long ago. But is there anything that's trending this year that's becoming more popular?
Yeah, definitely. And again, this is just sort of coming back to everyone's favourite sort of investment class. But yeah, property is probably a big one just at the moment. Like again, just sort of in client conversations that start of 2019, the property market was in a bit of a different spot where there's a lot of doom and gloom. Prices were coming back. Yep. And because most people's biggest sort of asset is their property, there's this negative, I guess, vibe that just sort of translates in the economy when house prices come down because people's wealth starts coming down. Yep. People get nervous. But off the back of sort of lower interest rates last year, the Liberal Party winning the election, things are pretty positive out there just for in the investment world at the moment. And expectations are that sort of house prices are in a pretty good spot now, and throughout sort of 2020 there should be positive returns in that sort of class. So a lot more property conversations are sort of popping up off the back of that. Don't want to get too nerdy with the listeners, from the finance point of view, but yeah, the other big one is probably interest rates. Yeah. And the reason for that is they have a big bearing on what assets sort of do from a return point of view. Yep. So big part of the reason that Australia experienced a big housing boom in the last couple of years and share markets have experienced a boom in the last little while is that interest rates have sort of come down. Yep. So yeah, generally, if interest rates are coming down, people can borrow more to buy property. Mm-hmm. If people can borrow more, they spend more. Yep. So yeah, interest rates are low, likely to be low for a while. So that's important and leading to people sort of being able to borrow.
Yeah, more amounts of money, which then drives higher prices.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. All right. Well, next question is, what are some of the biggest challenges like everyday clients of yours might face, like the average Joe Blow who comes in? Is there something that's sort of similar, or is it very broad?
We've probably touched on a few, but I think, like you said, the first one is people aren't taught about money at school and stuff. So oftentimes, if someone hasn't got an advice or got parents who know what they're doing, it can be tricky to know exactly where to start. And that leads into probably, like the next point where it's pretty confusing. The industry's almost set up to confuse people, I think. Like there's a lot of finance providers out there that make a lot of money in fees when people sort of don't do anything and just leave money in like super accounts or bank accounts that they've forgotten about over time. Like the high house prices is a big one for clients. Like we spoke about. Mm-hmm. And then the other one's probably everyone's so busy.
Time.
Everyone's time poor. Everyone wants to get ahead. Obviously, and work towards sort of setting themselves up in the future. But it's easy for time to get away from them when they're running hard with work or starting a family and doing everything that they need to do. So I'd just say, like again, like we spoke about before, it's sort of work out what you want to work towards, work out where you're starting from, and then make a plan or get some help.
Yeah, nice. All right, what is the number one goal your clients have? Like, is it to pay off their property? Is it to buy an investment property? You know, I guess it's a pretty broad question. I know you obviously deal with a lot of clients from a lot of like an age gap. Obviously, younger clients have different goals to someone who might be just about to retire. But is there any sort of similar traits from those people?
Yeah, probably the biggest one, and again, it comes back to sort of the property piece, is that if anyone has their own home that they're living in and they've got a mortgage, the number one goal is to pay that mortgage off.
Yep.
Basically, you know, get rid of the bank and own their property debt free.
What a great goal.
Yeah, it's a massive goal, and it's one that I've seen with clients. Oftentimes, when I meet with like older clients, the richest ones or the ones with the most assets aren't generally the happiest ones.
Yeah,
it's those that don't have a mortgage.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, well, and it's because what it gives, a client is options.
Yeah,
everyone's biggest monthly expense is usually their mortgage.
Yep.
So when that mortgage is gone, clients can reduce days at work. They
lifestyle.
Lifestyle. It's 100% lifestyle. You know, if they're running hard in a job where they don't get much time with their family, they can make changes to that because they don't need a couple of $1,000s a month to go to the bank each year.
Yeah.
Each month, sorry.
Yep.
So that I'd say that it's probably that great Australian dream piece as well.
And I'll jump on the back of that. Like for me, and I know we've been working hard closely for a number of years, but I'll put it out that this is my number one goal at the moment, like to pay off my debt as quickly and as fast as possible, because again, it's lifestyle for me. Like I would love to get to a stage where, you know, I can pick and choose what I do in life with my time, especially, I know this is a long way down the track, but you know, you get to that age where, you know, you can maybe do the job that you want to do. You don't have to do a specific job because, you know, you're flexible, you've worked hard, you've made sacrifices, you've worked hard on your debt reduction, you've paid off extra off your mortgage. Like, I think there's so much for people to learn in that space, especially around the housing, and sort of get yourself debt free, do the work early and reap the rewards a bit later on.
100%. Yeah, you bang on. It's really choices and options that it gives you. And you know, it's not beneficial to have a loan for too long. Like except for the banks, you know, everyone hears how much money they make each year, and that's off the back of, I guess, all the home loans in Australia and all the interest that they make.
Yes.
So you know, the sooner that monkey's off your back, so to speak, I guess the more options you've got, and it's just complete flexibility. Which that would definitely be number one. Yeah,
I love that. Well, I guess this is something we briefly touched on before, but you know, the compound effect.
Yep.
Like how does this work? Like tell me a bit more about this for someone who might not know about it.
Yep. So compound interest is probably something that maybe year 4 someone can remember that they heard something. It's one of the small money things that might get mentioned in school.
Probably one of the small things, that you learn in school that might be worth remembering.
Yeah, exactly. But oftentimes we sort of move on, and you know, basically time is your friend when it comes to sort of investing or money. And that's an issue for some people because we all want everything now.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's no real silver bullet when it comes to getting ahead financially. Like
our man Warren Buffett.
Correct. Yeah. You know, and if someone tells you they can, you know, turn you into a millionaire overnight, sort of thing, that, you know, run sort of, and there's no easy way to do it.
That's definitely the problem with people these days. Like they want everything and they want it now.
Yeah, and every successful person, and I guess this comes back to just a broad sort of success chat, and obviously you see this with footy and everything else. Like everyone that's in the position you're in had to go through the same process. It's a timepiece. It's you know,
years and years of hard work, sacrifice, dedication. Doesn't just happen overnight.
All the extras, you know, all the sacrifices obviously you guys have to make from a week to week basis compared to the rest of us, you know, like sort of weddings and, you know, all the rest of it. No different, I guess, from a money perspective in that.
Definitely.
Like time is your friend.
Yep.
And the longer you're doing it, the better the results. But yeah, compound interest is basically, it's a principle of sort of earning money. And you not being involved in the process.
Yep.
So Albert Einstein, who was a pretty smart dude, called it sort of the eighth wonder of the world.
Yep.
And so this principle is sort of like when you hear the rich get richer, or it's easier to make your second million after your first, is because people have a pretty big amount of money that they've got invested.
Yep.
And then it doesn't take as much work for that to grow.
Yep.
But yeah, Compound Effect, it's a book I've just started reading at the back end of last year. And, the focus of the book, I've sort of taken it now and really pushing it with clients this year, is that, reaping results comes from small actions completed like consistently over time.
Yep.
And so
I love that.
Yeah. So from investment point of view or debt point of view, or even just sort of financial success, it's small decisions that don't feel like much day to day that lead to sort of big outcomes or big results.
That's you could dead set relay that to every aspect of life, I feel, as well.
Well, yeah, and that's why I know you love reading, and I love this book as well, and it links 100%, like I just sort of into the health space as well, where one gym session, prepping your meals on a Sunday, drinking water, getting sleep, they're really small things on their own.
Yep.
But accumulated, week to week over time will lead to sort of big changes. And yeah, it's something that just sort of hit me in the face when I was reading it from a client perspective, because that's sort of the journey that I'm on with them and trying to help them. But oftentimes, it feels like it's such a small thing to do, but doing it over time, will lead to big changes, and people sort of setting themselves up.
I love that. And I guess, is there any other books you could sort of recommend to people? Like, I know you touched on there's obviously a lot of finance on the news and in magazines and newspapers, but is there any other sort of books for someone who might want to improve their financial situation that you would recommend to read? Yeah,
well, it's one that we've spoken about. Is actually one of the questions that popped up. But I would say in Australia, the best probably source from a financial education point of view is probably the Barefoot Investor, Scott Pape.
Yep.
His book I picked up sort of when I was probably about 18, and probably led me down the path of actually sort of getting to where I am now, and a lot of the philosophies and stuff that he has I would use with clients, and it's got a really sort of common sense approach to money and breaks things down really simply. And his book will give you sort of a start to finish view around what you should be thinking about and what you can do to sort of get your finances set up to get ahead.
Yep.
I've
read the book and I love it.
Yeah.
It's very good. I would recommend it as well for anyone who wants to improve, or who's just starting, or, wants to learn the basics of how do you get yourself in a better situation. Definitely.
Yeah, he's got a big profile, sold a stack of books, and it's been really good, I guess, for Australians. And what you were touching on just with sort of money education in schools.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure that's like a space he's going down, where he's pushing quite hard to sort of get stuff in schools to, I guess, help your kids and our future kids and stuff.
Your kids as well.
Yeah.
All right. Well, quite often we hear about, superannuation. Is there any tips you might have for someone around, I guess, the superannuation sort of income? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So it's one of those things, especially with younger clients, where it's out.
They're not thinking of it?
Well, they're not thinking about it because it's, I can't touch that till I'm grey and old sort of thing. So it's easy to get those statements and just sort of toss them in the bin. Thing to sort of note about super is it's your money. So, work is required each month, each year, to put in 9.5% of your salary in there. And, after you've been working for a little while, it turns out being a pretty substantial money, maybe more than obviously people have in savings or other investments. So it's worthwhile sort of taking a little bit of an interest in it because it's yours. With super, one of the places people get caught out is our generation, likes to sort of chance their arms at a couple of different careers, usually by the time they're sort of 30 or 40. So that can lead to multiple super accounts spread all over the place. So getting all those into one account would probably be a starting point.
Consolidate.
Yeah, consolidate all your super into one.
Which would then, I guess, minimise fees.
Correct, yeah, bang on. So you're paying fees in each account you're in.
Yep.
So, rather than paying 5 sets, pay one. And, that when you're looking at that is probably the big sort of thing to consider, is around what are the different fees that you're paying in each account, because they can vary pretty significantly.
Yep.
And the more you pay in fees, I guess the less that gets left in your account at the end of the day that you can use later on when you can touch it. So take a note in the fees that you're paying. And like I was just sort of having a look at this to give everyone a bit of an example. But if you know, I had a prospective client that was 30 and they were earning around 80 grand, had 50,000 in super.
Yep.
If they paid 2% in fees for their working career, and their friend, exactly the same position, paid 1% in total fees in their super over that sort of
So
same
1% difference.
1% difference, which again, compound effect doesn't sound like very much. The mate who had the 1% fees would have $120,000 more in his super account at age 65 than his friend.
Wow.
So that's a few sort of lattes or something in retirement.
If that doesn't give you a little kick up the backside to, get your super in order and
just have a
chase
think
it
about
up,
it.
have a think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. Well, here's a fun fact for you. I guess, with NRL players, like we get paid monthly, and with normal, I guess, people who aren't NRL players, sorry,
Normal people.
well, they get paid super on top of their wage as 9.5%.
Yep. At the moment, 9.5%.
I'm pretty sure it's going up.
Yep.
Where NRL players, we pay super out of our own salary. So our clubs or our employee don't pay. You obviously know this because you've been looking after me for a long time. But I just thought it's a fun fact for people out there who might not know that.
Yeah, it is interesting. And so does that mean, is it like with other players, like automatically done, or the player's got to nominate?
Yeah, you nominate, and you can nominate like what percentage, but that's the minimum. Yeah. So, but anyway, I've got this is a little bit funny, but I want to hit you up with a case study.
Yep.
NRL player, all right? 21-year-old kid who has just signed a 3-year, $300,000 per year contract. So he's getting $900,000 over the next 3 years. What bit of advice, or I know this is pretty general, but a bit of advice and I guess a general plan would you implement for that player? Yep.
Well, firstly, he's in a good spot.
He's in great. So he's 21 years old.
21 years old, yeah. So,
because this player, player X, he might think I'm going to go and buy a brand new car now. I'm going to go and buy $100,000 car. I'm going to go and buy a $70,000 car. So, this is, I guess, kind of the reason why I wanted to have this chat and just to see, what your thoughts were around it.
And I'm sure you've probably seen that in younger clients. Younger players.
I have.
And probably older players as well. And I guess the big thing would be, and sometimes I'll see this in a few different careers, it's sort of, you want to make the most of the money while it's there.
Yep.
And as a rugby league player, the average career is not that long.
Correct.
As you would know. So, I guess it's like when you are there and earning that sort of income, the first thing would be make the most of it while it's there.
Yep.
The big thing with our case study is probably for the young guy, putting in place a bit of structure around how much he sort of just gets to spend week to week.
Yep.
Can't be so restrictive that he can't do anything. Mm-hmm. But with him, I'd be looking at sort of putting in place like a personal spending sort of figure, and like let's agree on a figure which might be a couple of hundred, maybe
for the week.
$400 or $500 or whatever it might be.
Yep.
Let's give you enough that you can sort of, buy clothes, buy groceries, sort of do all the stuff that you need to do.
Yep.
But we've still got enough money sort of left over to start building funds for him in the future.
Yep.
So just thinking about this before our chat, I would say, like, usually with normal clients, which is non-NRL playing clients.
I know this is a different scenario.
Yeah, just a bit different. Yeah, but I would say if a client who sort of in a normal career was saving around maybe 20 to 30% of their take-home pay towards sort of their bigger goals or investing, debt reduction, that's probably the target usually. Mm-hmm. Giving them obviously 70 to 80% for everything else. With this client, I would say, and this is when there's a bigger income. He's 21, so hopefully the not too big expenses.
Yep.
probably around that 50 to 60 mark is more the space that we want to target.
Yep.
So let's give you 40% to, live week to week, pay your rent or your mortgage or, whatever that looks like.
Yep.
And then let's take the rest of it and start putting it towards, building up property deposit if that's where you want to go.
Yep.
Doing some share investing or just sort of starting to build assets for the future.
Yep.
Yeah. And so that would be a big one, just sort of getting that structure, making sure he's got enough to do what he needs to do, and then taking the rest. And again, just sort of running some rough numbers on this to just give a bit of example of how it might play out.
Yep.
So I think I got to a point where let's assume that he was earning about $13,000 a month, roughly after tax, super, agent, and the rest.
Yep.
If we took 60%, that will be $7,800 a month that we can use towards the investing part. The other 5.2 is spending and bills, everything else. In this scenario, let's just say his goal is to sort of get into a property maybe by the time his contract, the 3-year contract's finished, like building up the deposit.
Yep.
If we out of the 7,800 save $5,000 a month of that, which is again a pretty big number, but
I understand for people out there these are big numbers, but
that's the thing from a strategy point of view. With if you're on a $50,000 a year, the
copy and paste.
The principles are the same.
Yep.
This structure is, I guess, obviously relevant because we're talking about a footy player.
Yep.
But in this example, that strategy $5,000 a month by the end of his 3 years, he's got 180 sitting in cash.
Yeah, wow.
Ready to go, maybe back to that.
So there's that $1 million property.
There's that $1 million property we were talking about previously.
Yep.
And then with the other sort of 2,800 a month, if we were to look at maybe a share account or some sort of other investment, diversify,
Yep.
Give him something else to sort of build while he's focusing on the property. Again, assuming a bit of a return over a couple of years, there'd be about 115,000 in that account after the 3 years.
Yeah, wow.
So
so that's, I guess, that's what's there if you get it right.
Correct. Yeah. And again, like we said, what we're talking about here, the numbers might be a bit different to sort of the average Joe in the street working a normal job, but the principles are the same.
Yep.
What percent can you put aside? As I said, 20 to 30% is probably like the high performing clients that I've got. And if that's done over 10 years for a normal client, their financial life's changed. Obviously, with the bigger numbers, it might be a shorter time frame, but it's still the same principle.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, I think some of the challenges that NRL players face, of all ages, is definitely, I guess, overspending, not saving money, not sticking to that, those principles you just spoke about, and even like the increase in income. And especially in terms of the case study that we're talking about, like this 21-year-old kid is potentially, before he signed this new contract, been on $50,000 or $60,000, and then all of a sudden he's just gone up to $300,000. Like that's a huge jump. And obviously, month to month, your pay package is a lot bigger. So, this individual might not know what to do. But I guess what would you recommend for this kid in the case study to not do?
Good question.
Like to me, it's definitely the car.
Yeah.
Things like the car and things like the assets that are going to depreciate.
Yeah.
Boat, jet ski.
Well, and that's probably tricky in that example when he's gone from 50 to 300 and such a big increase. It can lead to, like you said, overspending.
Yeah.
And jumping outside maybe what's needed.
Yep.
With the structure in place, and this is sort of what happens when you start planning sort of like things with your money. It's you want to value your money, and like you said, jumping in and buying $100,000 car at 21, it could be done.
Yeah.
But in a couple of years, it's not going to be worth 100,000.
Yep.
And that money, I guess, in the finance geek sort of world, there's a thing called opportunity cost.
Yeah.
Where that money could have been better used elsewhere in building some assets that might sort of pay him something later on, which is an investment property or shares.
Yep.
So with that structure in place and sort of back to that 40%, if he can, get some help from someone around to sort of set that up, then if he can fit the car into that sort of allocation, then it's like, do your best.
Yep.
Because we've worked out that, you can live on this So if you want to save up your money or sort of work towards a goal with what you've got there,
Yep.
you can do so knowing that your other money has gone and is building for you.
Yep.
But that, oftentimes it's like when there's no structure or plan, it's like, well, there's a big chunk in my bank account each month.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have a crack at this sort of thing. So it's just it's thinking about your money a bit more because again, for a 21-year-old NRL player, he won't know this, but it could be a short time in the game. So make the most of it and
100%.
set yourself up.
Yep. Yeah, I love that. All right, well, thanks. That was awesome. I want to finish with the fan Q&A. Now, I put out to the listeners on my Instagram story a Q&A, a chance for you guys to get involved in the podcast, and I love it. Get a lot of people chiming in and wanting to send in questions. So thank you to everyone that sent in a question. And I'll start off. Actually, we've already touched on this one. It's from Matt 8 Ranley, who asked, thoughts on the barefoot philosophy, which you already touched on before, is an outstanding philosophy, and the book.
And he's got a stack of material out there. He's got like a subscription email you can sign up for, and he does a lot of Q&A answers where people will write in questions about their own situation, and he gives them a bit of a high level guide on what they can be doing. So people could jump on there and maybe see someone who's in a similar spot to them or something that was sort of out of interest. There's a massive Facebook page. I think he's got 30,000. I don't even know. It's been a while since I've had a look how much is in there. But I'd say he's got some really good stuff, and no matter what sort of starting point, he'd probably have something or a website or an article or something that you could
beautiful.
use.
All right, next question is from Spedding Ryan, who asks, what is the best advice for an average Joe, invest or save?
Good question. So I would say step one, and this is, I guess, back to a bit of the principles of money advice that we sort of gets drummed into us when we're sort of first learning to be advisors. But you need to make sure that you got a bit of money set aside as a safety net, probably as sort of step one. There's nothing worse than looking at your bank account and seeing not much. It creates like short-term anxiety around money when you don't sort of have like a backup.
Yep.
So if you don't have that backup, and the number could be different for everyone, but like the rule in our industry, I guess generally speaking, would be like 3 to 6 months of your living expenses set aside somewhere in a rainy day fund. That can take a while to get to. So it might be getting $500 or $1,000, and then sort of $2,000 as a starting point.
Yep.
But it just means you can cover any short-term like money issues that pop up, like car breaking down, fridge blowing up, unexpected medical bills. You don't have to worry about credit cards when you've got a bit of money in the bank. So I'd say, step one is to make sure you got enough. Everyone might have their own number that they feel comfortable with.
Yep.
Get that sorted. And then you can sort of start thinking about investing, or depending on, if there's a few other things you want to work towards, like could be your next trip, buying a car, saving for the property deposit. Treat that as secondary.
Yep, nice. All right, next question is from Ryan Algie, and I know you briefly touched on this before, but maybe just reiterate it again. What percentage should you put towards savings from your salary?
Yeah, so with this, everyone will be a little bit different. Like we sort of said, the average client to the high earning client and, NRL player. But yeah, I would say 20 to 30% is the target that you should aim for over time.
Yep.
And it might take a bit of time to get there. So I've seen it, and I've even spoken to a business sort of accountant who does this with business owners, and sometimes it might be starting at 1% and just sort of making sure that that's there. Start building the habit of putting money aside and building funds up. And then over time, as your income improves or your expenses drop, you can try to sort of build that up.
Yep.
But yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. All right. Next question is from Pat Bond, who says, roughly what percentage should go where from your income? So I know you just touched on, I guess, the savings percentage, but, can you break down, I guess, the other percentage where that might go?
Yep. So with the work that I do from sort of the budgeting perspective, and one of the focus points at the start is sort of breaking down expenses into sort of 3 areas: fixed expenses, everyday expenses, and then sort of savings and investing. Spoke about that sort of 20 to 30% target.
Yep.
Savings and investing. with everyday spending, that's sort of usually the room where there's a bit of room to move. Like when you sort of meet a client, or if they're starting to look at their money and off the back of this, running some numbers to see where their money goes.
Yep.
That's a place they can sort of make some big changes if they're overspending. And because we like sort of having everything now, usually like most of us are pretty good spenders, just generally speaking. But from like about 10 years experience, I would say on average the amount that I allocate with clients on sort of the week to week spending, and that will be like petrol, groceries, coffee, dining out, entertainment, $250 to sort of $500 a week sort of per person.
Yep.
So clients that might be earning a bit more, they might be up sort of towards $1,000 a week mark as a couple. And then, other clients could be sort of down to around that sort of like 500 a week or so mark, or break it in half for individuals. But that's probably a big one, because with the fixed expenses, rent, mortgage, insurances and stuff, utilities, you can jump around and do a bit of a search to try and reduce some costs, which is a worthwhile exercise every now and again. But there's only so much room you can move usually on that side because they're fixed.
Yep. Sweet. All right. Next one is from Josh Summers. What are the best strategies to invest small amounts over the long term?
Well, coming back to, I guess, the high level strategies that we've spoken about previously, when you're looking at like goals and how your money should be investing, one of the things we haven't touched on yet is if you're saving up for something in the short term, basically you need to save that in just a bank account where there's no risk of the money going down.
Yep.
So if someone's building up money to go on a holiday next year, or buy a car, pay their child's school costs, or whatever, go on a holiday, you don't really want to put that in an account where if the
You could potentially lose it.
well, you could potentially lose it. Or, in 12 months when you need the money, the share market is down or the property market's down 20%, then you've got 20% less to put towards the goal.
Yep.
So any short-term goals, you've got to treat sort of savings as the priority, which sucks at the moment because you might get 1% or 1 and a bit percent on your money. So you don't get much of a return, but at least the money's safe.
Yep.
Then, medium to sort of longer term is when you can look at shares and property. But as we spoke about, if your property transaction is going to cost you a fair bit of money, so in the short term, if we're looking at sort of smaller amounts, that might be where the share market is a more viable option, because you can start with a smaller initial amount and just add to it. Smaller amounts.
All right, next question is from Kane Ebb. What are your predictions for the property market in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, this one's a tricky one.
This is tricky.
People a lot smarter than me put estimates out on this stuff and then get it wrong.
Yeah. But it is, I guess, you hear on the news that it's coming back.
Yeah.
Now, don't you?
Yeah. And that's, the stuff that I've read this year, and conversations with real estate agents, and, predominantly they're sort of local real estate agencies. Markets sort of started a bit of a move back up.
Clearance rates are a lot higher.
And one of the reasons, and I guess I can speak sort of more locally because we're sort of both based here, is that interest rates are down, which we spoke about before, will help people borrow more and spend more, which helps prices. The second part locally in the Southern Shire is from a stock point of view. There's not a huge amount of properties for sale, so there's a lot of competition when people are looking to buy, which causes, I guess, prices to go up. So the economic updates that I've seen are that 2020 will be a sort of positive year. I don't want to get hung out to dry for this. And again, I'm
disclaimer.
Another disclaimer. I'm not a forecaster, but a lot of the stuff that I've read is that it could be 8-9% up, maybe around sort of 10% in 2020 based on what's happening at the moment, and I guess what things look like going forward. But no one really knows what's going to happen in the future. So take that as you will. But expectations at the moment, both shares and property in 2020 are hopefully for a good year. Which is good.
That's awesome to hear. I guess the last question now is from Matt McCabe, and this is an interesting one. Are people concerned about how their money is invested, e.g., hearing a lot more about climate change and people looking for more ethical investments?
I would say a definite yes. ethical investing, like as sort of a investment area, has gotten bigger over time. Obviously, with there's a lot of like climate change and a whole range of other things happening in the environment. That's sort of opening people's eyes up to how companies behave and what the outcomes of their actions are over time. And so ethical investing as a whole has gotten bigger and is getting bigger at the moment. And a lot of sort of investment options will screen out companies now that are involved in practices that aren't great for the environment. So, ethical funds won't accept mining companies, gaming companies, tobacco, weapons companies and stuff like that. So even if they're good investments, there's ethical investment options out there that will sort of screen them out.
Yeah, wow.
And from a client's perspective, if their preference is to only invest in companies that are doing the right thing by the environment, then there's a whole stack of options that have actually performed quite well over time that they can sort of invest in.
Yeah, wow. That's interesting.
Yeah.
All right, Ports. Well, let's wrap it up there, mate. It's been a great chat. I really appreciate you coming on today, mate. Thanks very much for your time.
Thanks for having me, mate. Loved it.
That's all. I think I will chuck out one more disclaimer today, guys. Like today was just a sort of general chat with Ports while we were talking about finance and the industry around it and decision making. But if you feel like you need to get your financial situation in order, then I do recommend seeing a trusted professional. Hopefully, we'll be able to point you in the right direction in terms of looking after your finances. But yeah, as I said, that's it for episode 3 today. It's been a great episode. And if you enjoy the podcast, make sure you subscribe and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks.